ladies and gentlemen, once again, Mr. Bob Repass.
All right. All you guys that I can see, y'all get to go to lunch first for being back on time. Right? All right. All right, well, everybody's making their way in. If I could get our Seller Finance Coalition panel to come on up here and have a seat. Eddie, Jeff, Glenn, Matt. All right, so for those of you that are new, relatively, and haven't heard a lot about the Seller Finance Coalition, real quick history is back in, I believe it was it 2014, 2015, Glenn?
Sometime along there.
Somewhere along time. 14? We started a Seller Finance Coalition. Glenn reached out to Eddie and me, and we were like, we got to do something about some of this regulation that came down with the SAFE Act and Dodd-Frank. And we've worked hard for the last 5 years, and we're making progress, which we're going to fill you in on. I want to introduce the lobbyist that we engaged in 2014, who has spearheaded our efforts ever since. He's been a huge supporter. A lot of times he worked when maybe the contributions weren't where they needed to be to keep them afloat, but thanks to you guys, we're getting better at that and so forth. And he's truly a supporter of our industry. I can't say that in 2014 he knew a whole lot about seller finance at that time, but now he can go tell our story just as good as we can when he visits with the congressmen and their staff, as well as the Senate, which we'll get into in just a minute here. So please help me welcome Matt Keelan and the rest of our panel.
Thanks, Bob. Glad to be back. And as Bob mentioned, we've been working together for quite some time. And this is an issue that has gotten real personal for me. In fact, so personal that my father, who lives up in New Jersey, is getting ready, hopefully, to start seller financing some properties himself. So through the knowledge that I learned from the great folks up here on the deck with me, my dad got really interested in trying to do the same type of thing, and we certainly want him to be able to do more than 3 a year. Something like 24 or unlimited would be really nice. So what we wanted to talk about is just update everybody on our progress this Congress. And obviously, Congress looks a lot different this year than it did in the previous Congress. Democrats took over on the House side. And I think there was some trepidation that we might not get the traction that we had with the Republicans in the majority. And in fact, the opposite has, quite frankly, been true. We've found a great member from Texas, Vicente Gonzalez, who has really been our champion. He came on board late in the last Congress. As soon as we sat down and talked to him about what we were trying to do, he knew exactly what we were talking about. He had a background in real estate law. His legislative assistant, who handles his financial services portfolio, has been a godsend for us, Fred Castro. He has really dug into this bill and this topic and wanted to try to move the bill. A lot of times on Capitol Hill, just like anywhere else in business, you have folks that may have a good meeting with you, but when you leave, there's not a lot of follow-up, and you need to find champions that are willing to roll their sleeves up and get dirty along with you, maybe run into a brick wall or two to knock it down. And we have found that with Vicente Gonzalez and Fred Castro. And I'm going to ask Jeff Watson, who's really been working side by side with Fred crafting this legislation, about the changes that we've made that I think has made the bill much more likely to pass, and also a much better product. Jeff, if you could put some color on that, that would be great.
There are three big differences to this particular proposed bill that are significant for us. The first is we've taken the number 24 and we've gone up. So if you're doing between the 100 and 200 price band, you can do 20 deals there. If you're in between the 100 and 200 price band, you can do 30 deals there. And below 100, I believe it's unlimited. So, and that's language that's coming from the Democrat side of the table. So that's really exciting. The second thing is we're making these exceptions to Dodd-Frank and to SAFE Act. Previous versions did not address the SAFE Act. This version addresses SAFE, Dodd, and Truth in Lending. So we're reaching inside of all three of those bills and tweaking all three of them. The last thing is this particular version says it is for owner financing, seller financing with a deed in mortgage or deed in deed of trust, and does not apply to lease options, does not apply to selling on contract for deed. Those are hot button issues that contract for deed and lease option are the anger points on the Democratic side. When we go in and diffuse that, we have gone from being a potential opponent to now we're a hero and an ally with them. So we've made those changes. Is it ideal for us? No, but it really gets us where we want to be. If we can start doing 50 deals a year on deeds and mortgages, that's a whole lot better than 3 a year on anything.
Exactly. We're blessed to have Jeff as part of the team because his legal background has been a godsend when we're talking with these folks and making sure that what we're doing is actually beneficial to us. A perfect example is another client of mine had to pull a piece of legislation back after their general counsel got fired for missing a lot of things and made them look really bad, and they're in a hole right now. But having you there at the forefront has been a big help. After Jeff, I wanted to call on who I call the George Washington of the Seller Finance Coalition. He's the man that really got us all started, Glenn Lee. And just if Glenn, you can give us a quick update on why you got started in this and why it's important to the industry.
George Washington.
That means you're the oldest one up here, Glenn.
Thank you. I actually grew up with seller financing. My father worked shift work at night, and my mother would buy a little house and fix it up. And they only had a few notes, but I got a good taste of it throughout my early years. And then I had an uncle in Corpus Christi that bought a failed subdivision of frame houses that couldn't go conventional loans, and he sold them actually with a contract for deed. But sold out the whole subdivision. So I was inspired by all that, and so moved into Houston and got in the business. And then I'm told that, well, you've got to get an RMLO license. I said, okay, whatever. I don't think it applies, but I did 20 hours of education, I believe it was, nothing to do with seller financing. It was all about the government loans and all of that. But I managed to pass it and got the license. A year later, I had to take continuing education. It had nothing to do with seller financing. And the next year when it came up, I said, forget it. So that's when I came up to Dallas and met with Eddie and Bob, and we're sitting there and said, this isn't right. This is just not right. We got to do something. So that's where the Seller Finance Coalition started. A friend of mine, a lobbyist named Wayne T. Frankie, I went to him, said, hey, can you help us on this? And he said, hey, I got the best lobbyist in Washington. And so that's how we got hooked up with Matt. So here we are. We're going to get it done.
Yep. It's interesting, when we first got started, we were talking to folks that a lot of them had written the Dodd-Frank legislation, which obviously impacted us a great deal. And they had no clue what seller financing was. And that's why having folks like Bob and Eddie, Glenn and Jeff, and we're going to talk to a couple other people that have come up and actually met with legislators and their staffers, to explain to them how it impacts your business, but also how it impacts their communities back home has been so helpful. Unfortunately, a lot of times in Washington, D.C., people write pieces of legislation that have massive impacts on industry without any knowledge of what the impact is going to be. Sometimes it's out of malice, and sometimes it's mostly out of just ignorance. They think it's going to work well, and in point of fact, it doesn't. That's one of the things that has really given us an opportunity. After Dodd-Frank, there has been a buzz around Capitol Hill, mostly among Republicans, but it's growing buzz amongst Democrats as well, that there were a lot of unintended consequences with that piece of legislation, and that's kind of where we fall in. And one of the things that's taken a lot of time this time around, I'd let Bob and Eddie maybe talk a little bit about this, is we found this new ally in Vicente Gonzalez and Fred Castro, his staffer, and we had to work with a new majority that looked at us initially as, potential enemies, not as potential friends. And through that education process and talking more about our consumers than about us, we were really able to turn a corner, not just with Vicente Gonzalez and Fred, but through Vicente Gonzalez and Fred, a bunch of folks on the financial services majority staff and other Democrat members of Congress. You want to talk a little bit about how we've been able to do that?
Sure. Obviously, their intention with the Dodd-Frank was consumer protection, okay? And as Matt kind of alluded to, maybe that was consumer protection on steroids, as it was, maybe some overprotection, and they didn't realize how it impacted folks back in their community, back in their district. And part of the message when we go and speak to them is to try to tell the story. And when we talk about how it impacts their constituents' access to capital, okay, in their particular markets, all of a sudden the light bulb goes off. They realize that people back home are not having the opportunity for affordable home ownership. And I want everybody to kind of just listen to what I'm saying. I said affordable home ownership. All right, that's different from what a lot of the buzzword out there is right now, which is affordable housing. Okay, and affordable housing is great and it's needed as well. Okay, but affordable housing mostly will indicate rental properties, whether they're multifamily or whatever. You talk about opportunity zones and how they can create affordable housing. Well, everybody talks about, I'm going to build this big multifamily project there or whatever. Our message is about affordable home ownership. How can somebody who can afford a home have the opportunity to buy one? And a lot of them, especially on properties below $100,000, $125,000, which when you're talking to somebody in New York or California in their offices, they look at you with cross-eyed like there can't be a house worth $85,000 somewhere, okay? But for the most of America, they get it. And when we tell them the banks don't lend on those properties, due to Dodd-Frank basically reducing the amount of points they can charge, they just can't make a profit on it. So they're not providing access to capital to their neighborhoods and communities. And then when we do stress how it does stabilize those areas, it gets rid of the vacant properties, it gets rid of the tenant-owned properties, all of a sudden they kind of get the story and they're like, that shouldn't have affected you guys, what can we do to help? And they've been very receptive to that. And one thing that Matt mentioned I think was extremely important that I know Jeff and I have felt really to our advantage this time is not only do we have the congressman and his staff engaged, but already before it's even introduced to committee, we have the committee staff engaged. And without going through the whole process of how the committee works and everything, even though a congressman will introduce the bill, the Financial Services Committee has to write the language, has to approve the language, get it to the chairwoman of the committee and everything, and having them in on the ground floor, when Fred would send it to Jeff and I to look at and we tweak it and they send it back, he runs it by the committee. So once we introduce it in the committee, which Jeff's going to talk about in a little bit about how imminent that is, then we are very close to already having their blessing, and that will speed that up. But as far as seller financing and some of the stories and messages, Eddie, that we've told as we visited the office, and we visited both sides of the aisle, and why don't you just kind of give a little color on what you have learned over the past 4 or 5 years that we face.
Well, one thing that, and let me say this, guys. Wayne T. Frankie, your lobbyist friend, was right. If it wouldn't have been for this guy, it wouldn't have been a deal. You guys give this guy a tremendous hand.
Thank you.
We didn't know anything about lobbying. We were the biggest rookies. I mean, just completely clueless. And Matt has led us along the way. Matt gets you an introduction with everybody you need. Matt has a trusted relationship in Washington, D.C. with the people that make the difference. And that's it. And he introduced us. He introduced us, and he believed in us. And he did it for way less money than we promised to pay him along the way some of the times, and he never gave up for us. And there's just nothing to say other than that our industry had the biggest dumb luck in the world, and that we bumped into a lobbyist that was the guy. That's the truth.
I got to say something, though. Look at Glenn Lee's face. How can you say no to that? I mean, you know.
He's going to go up on the bus.
So one of the things that we really didn't know, because we were entrepreneurial, right? We understood the effect of seller financing, but we really didn't know how to message it. We didn't know how to message it from a lobby effort. And Matt quickly taught us, and he wasn't telling us to sell something that wasn't absolutely the truth. We just didn't know to emphasize it. Washington, D.C. is not about helping make your business way more profitable. They're about consumers. They're about people that are affected. And so we became highly focused on understanding that this is home ownership, and it really is home ownership for people that otherwise wouldn't have it. And we became focused on that, and all along the way, that has been our theme there. It will be your theme when you're helping us, right? When you're talking to a congressman that Matt says, hey, we need you to reach out and Idaho and find this guy, or we need you to go to Kansas City, and like whoever that is, that messaging is going to be seller financing helps people experience home ownership that otherwise would remain a tenant and never experience home ownership. And it's a true statement. And that really did become our theme as we talked about it. And it was really funny because obviously there are people that have done seller financing that aren't necessarily the best in the business, the most, and so we've had to overcome some of that, but Matt has guided us through how to do that. And I think that he's positioned us that when we go to DC, they think we're genuinely good people, that we're for profit, but they think we generally care about our customers and care about doing good business. And just that whole theme, Jeff clearly has helped us stay focused on that. Jeff understands, in some of his other law clients that like National RIA and so forth and so on. So we've had some good advice as to going in there. And if you guys are involved in it, I think we're going to be able to help you with some good messaging clearly from these guys as to how to go be effective. And that really, to me, is Matt got us in the door, and he helped us understand the proper messaging when we got inside the door.
Let me talk a little bit about how you guys can help and what it means. You hear the term sometimes grassroots, and everybody's not really sure what that is. I mean, obviously during a campaign, it's going and knocking on doors and things like that. But how does grassroots impact us? There's two ways, right? First, you meet with your congressman or their staff, and you tell their story face to face, right? That's not as easy, but it's very impactful. But there also is sending emails and letters to their office. So you can meet your congressman one of two ways. You can go to Washington, D.C., right? They call it the People's Building. You can just walk in there and talk to somebody on the staff. It's good to have an appointment, right? But if you're there,
real good to have an appointment.
and we can help you with that. But there are people that go in and they may just leave them a note and say, hey, I'm in your district. I really need you to support the Seller Finance Enhancement Act. Or you can meet them back home in the district when they're on recess and they're back home there. Again, find out when the representative is going to be there and meet with them. And we're going to provide this to you, Jeff's going to cover this towards the end, on how you can email them with the right message about, we need you to support this, it's been introduced, and we give them a call to action, and we ask for their help. Now, you're looking at us and you're like, yeah, but you've been in the business for 20, 30 years, it's too overwhelming, it's too intimidating. I don't know that I could do that. I can sit up here and Eddie can tell you, oh yeah, you can. But I want a couple people that I know have done it, who were intimidated at first and weren't sure they could do, to kind of tell their story. So I'm going to have Miss Beth Hale, if you'll grab that microphone there, and just kind of, Beth is from Colorado, and she saw the efforts, and Eddie will cover this in just a minute, on what we've done on the state level here in Texas, and she wanted to do the same thing in Colorado, but she also wanted to work on the national level, and she wanted to reach out to her representative, who was a Democrat, Congressman Perlmutter, and she worked on that. And Beth, tell us about your experience.
I will, absolutely. And first of all, I want to say to this panel, thank you so much for all the work you have done on our behalf. Thank you, thank you. You've worked at this for years. I was here last year and asked Matt what I could do, and he said, oh, Ed Perlmutter's having an open house, be great if you could attend it. And Matt Edwards helped me out, and we got about 6 people to go. And I have to tell you, I was intimidated because, I just couldn't put it in the words that these guys put it in, but I was really behind this. You know, overregulation is something every entrepreneur should be wary of, and it has a way of spreading like cancer. It's not always good for the consumer because oftentimes overregulation makes you have to pass down costs of doing business to the consumer, and sometimes it hurts them. But I couldn't say that eloquently at the time, and Bob Repass was great in sending me a list of talking points that we could sit down and talk to Mr. Perlmutter about. And I want to remind you, and this really came across in my meeting, how they like to hear from you. You are their constituents. They like to hear the stories, you know, like the story of this titanium student in this row that did a seller finance deal to put a woman in an abusive marriage into a house so she could get away from her husband and provide a safe place for her and her children. You know, when you tell a congressman a story like that, they start to get it. And so I just want to say, and the other way that the Seller Finance Coalition supported me was if I had a question that I didn't know the answer to, and they had some bizarre concerns, but I was able to just shoot Matt an email and say, hey, you know, how do I answer this? And at some point, of course, they passed off the congressman's assistance to the Seller Finance Coalition, and they took over the dialogue. So I just want to say it was way easier than I thought it would be, and I was just really happy to help, and I would invite you as entrepreneurs to take a look at the freedom of doing business as small business and the freedom of providing to consumers this kind of service. I invite you to do something similar. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.
Let me jump in on that, if I can. That's one thing that we were advised very wisely early on is it's not about us as business owners, it's more about the consumer. And that's very true. You know, if you look at our portfolio of people, I mean, you know, you've got, like she said, single mother with kids that could otherwise not be able to qualify for a FHA loan or something. So they're owners, they're people. Like one guy said, my kids were playing on an asphalt parking lot in an apartment building. And now I'm able to get a house with a yard. So it's very important. That message carries. You agree?
Totally agree.
It's your advice.
Is Mike Powell in here? Mike? Well, we'll have to go to David Fenolio then. Make sure you have your hand on the kill switch on that mic just in case.
He's usually so quiet.
It won't take me long.
Be interesting.
No, working with your congressmen and senators, they do want to hear the story. And as I was told many years ago about an advertising executive that facts tell, but stories sell. And the other thing is, one of the congressmen in a meeting stated that if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And our politicians do want to hear. And another thing is, as Matt said, you have to be very honest and of the highest integrity, because if you embarrass them, then that's it. They're not going to help you. And just in visiting in their offices, you just tell a story about a customer that you had. I've shared one about a lady that worked at the local Dairy Queen, and we sold her a house. She got sick. We couldn't get in touch with her. I drove 20 miles to the house and knocked on her door. And that's when I found out she was sick and she couldn't work. She said, I don't want to lose my house. I said, I don't want you to lose your house, but you have to pay something. And she said, well, I can't make the full payment. I think it's $350. And I said, can you pay $5, $10 a month? Yes. And I said, at least that way you'll show that you are sincere about it. She recovered. She paid for her house. And that's one of the things that I mash on is the fact is when we sell the house, we don't want it back. You know, that's a lot of the contract for deed, and that's where the bad actors have shown up. And the other thing is, none of us can do everything, but we can all do something. And they do pay attention to those emails whenever you reach out to them or phone calls.
Thank you, David. And just so you know, we have an annual fly-in, and a fly-in is a term for when a coalition gets a lot of their members to just kind of stampede Capitol Hill, spread out across all the different offices and have meetings set up and tell our story. And Matt and his team always do a great job of lining up these meetings. We probably have 25, 30 meetings in a day and a half that people go around to. We try to get you in to see your own representative as well as others in the state or on the committee. And we'll announce that. It'll be sometime in the spring, right? Isn't that when we usually do it?
Might be earlier this year.
Might be earlier, so we can get the momentum going. It won't be exactly winter time. It'll be a little cooler.
Might be winter time.
Maybe.
Might be winter time.
But real quick, where we're at, I'm going to let Jeff update us. We're in the process of reintroducing the Seller Finance Enhancement Act. Okay, we don't have the exact bill number yet because it hasn't been introduced, but we have made great strides, as he briefly mentioned up top. But I think yesterday we had an email from Fred Castro kind of updating us and say, hey, will you tell your people that you're meeting with tomorrow where we're at and what we need them to do? And we decided that you would be the messenger of that. So
that was like a thank you, Jesus email that showed up yesterday. The bill is written, and I'm not joking when I say it can be called the Speed Repass Watson bill, because we've written most of it. And Matt's helped us, and we've really gotten some things in that bill that, folks, if you'd told me 3 years ago we'd have it, I'd say no, we won't, but we've got it. The second thing that we got were specific links, and we will be sharing these, specific links of specific members of Congress that are on the Financial Services Committee that need to be contacted. If each one of those offices get approximately 100 emails, someone from that office is going to walk down the halls to find Fred and go, what's going on? And Fred is going to then convert them to our cause. The next thing that's going to be exciting is we've got the messaging of what they need to hear. So pay attention when you get an email from Bob or Eddie or myself or somebody else. Take action on it. Do not delete it. Get on it. It's simple. I'm going to be speaking with my client, National RIA. By the way, they're here today, so say hi to them. They've got some amazing software technology called Voter Voice that we're going to be able to use to dial in this so that you, from the comfort of your home, still wearing your fuzzy slippers, can make this thing happen via email. The last thing I'm going to say is this. Email messaging to your member of Congress is their preferred method of communication. It's easy for them to keep track of how many constituents are concerned about this issue. I want y'all to blow up and fill their boxes.
Excellent.
Anything else I need to say?
There will be a closing. We'll get it.
All right. But I don't want to go on too long because I can get all wound up on this stuff.
Oh, we know.
I got a couple quick questions for the audience. Who is proud of what you do? Who thinks what you do is helping your community out? Who would like to make more money? So basically what we're asking everyone to get involved in involves all three of those things, right? We have taken a couple of years to the point where people looked at us like we were outlaws and black hats, and now those very same people look at us as we're the white hat crew coming in to try to help people. So it can happen, and it has happened. But we need more folks in the Army to take this hill. And it does make a big difference when people hear from their own constituents, and even better would be hear from you and some of your customers that have had a great experience doing a seller finance deal. So we have never been closer than we are right now. As Jeff said, we've worked through everything with the committee to the point where when this bill does get dropped, there's going to be a call to action, and it's like no bullshit. The bullets are flying. We're going to need people to get engaged right then. And that point is coming. That's why I say we may need to have the fly-in when it's not so nice in Washington, D.C., because Fred may tell us, hey, we need you here, January, February. In fact, he's already mentioned those.
If Fred says it,
those
we
months.
do it.
That's right. So he's already hinted at those months. So we're about to go live, and we're about to go live with a really tight, good product that, quite frankly, has improved a hell of a lot this Congress from where it was before. And we'll continue to make progress up on Capitol Hill, but we're going to need artillery coming in from all across the country and be a force multiplier. Talk to other people that you know that aren't here today and get them to spend 10 minutes sending an email, and it's going to make a big difference. And if we pass this bill, it's going to make a big difference in everyone's bottom line. You know, one of the things I tell business owners all the time, if you take out your P&L and the government isn't the biggest thing impacting it, then we probably shouldn't be having a conversation. But almost every business owner agrees with me at the end of that conversation. The government's having a big impact on my P&L. So yeah, I can dedicate a couple minutes, and I'm damn proud of what I'm doing, and I want people to know I want to do more of it. And the more you do, the better it's going to help your community. We are helping people that want to own a home, but can't.
Let me talk to you a little bit about the history of the note business, right? In the 80s, seller financing became common because of high interest rates. When interest rates went back down, I really thought when interest rates dropped below 10%, nobody would do seller financing. But then the real estate investor got introduced to seller financing. Bob was at Associates, Tracy was at Metropolitan, so forth and so on. Bob was buying $250 million in seller finance notes a year. Around 2000, Bob was at Bayview. They were buying $400 million in seller finance notes a year, right? So people will do seller financing if they're not in such a regulatory environment. It pushed people back. The small-time real estate investor, even though they could hire an RMLO and they could go do all that stuff, the truth of the matter is this regulatory environment, it scared people. You can be compliant, but this is why we've pushed so hard, is because people don't offer seller financing because they don't know what it means or they don't know how it works, and they're not always people sitting there like you that are better informed. And so to look at the impact of this bill and the impact on the economic situation that relates to the note business, I'm not sure everybody can wrap their mind around it. My dad used to have a saying, it's as big as a wagon wheel, right? This change for our industry is gigantic.
And one little anecdote about what Eddie said when people hear about what we're doing. We've actually had members of Congress call and say, hey, I think I want to do a seller finance deal. Can you help me out on it. I mean, literally that has happened, right?
Absolutely.
Correct.
So
Correct.
that is, and oftentimes we run into folks who either the member of Congress or one of the staffers' parents have done these deals in the past. Like, oh, I didn't even know you guys were involved in Dodd-Frank. Yeah, let's go. Let's have them. We've actually converted folks to wanting to do deals, including members of Congress.
All right, so let us close with a little call to action here. Seller Finance Coalition does have a booth downstairs. You can join the coalition. You can just get on the grassroots list saying, I will be willing to email whoever you tell me to tell our story. And just let the folks down in the booth know that so that we can get you on the list. You can go to sellerfinancecoalition.org. You can join there. We have updated a lot of the websites so that everybody can get on there and not only join but get the latest information. As soon as we get the final language in a format that we could post on the website, we will do that. That should be within the next week or so, I would think. And then you'll actually be able to read through it. And if you do have any questions, you can email myself or Jeff. You can email Eddie and Glenn, but I don't, if they get a million emails, I don't know what, but any of us can make sure it gets to the right person. And if it's a question that we need Matt to address, we'll forward it to him and have him get with whoever needs that. If you can go to DC when we have the fly-in, that'll be great, even if it is cold. Not only is it a great experience for you in the industry, but if you've never, it is an impactful experience for you just to be able to be part of the process and just to see how it all works. Believe me, the first time I went up there, and now I've probably been up there 50 times, I mean, it's a whole new world. The first time you're like, oh, this is, you're walking into these buildings and you're seeing everything you see on TV or whatever, and then you're meeting with staff, and then after you go a while, you realize they go back home and they're normal people too, and they want to know what impacts their folks that are their neighbors back there. And telling the stories, I think really resonates. So Jeff, I'm going to let you take a minute to motivate everybody and tell them what you're going to be sending them with the links, and we're going to give them messaging on affordable home ownership.
You've got a few opportunities in your lifetime to make a difference, not just in your life, but in your kids' lives and in your community's life. And this is one of those opportunities. Begin to grasp what Eddie just talked about. This is bigger than a wagon wheel. This is where we not only get our seat at the table cemented, but we change the way people do business across America. We turn it back to the way it should be. You've got a chance to be a huge part of that. Please take this opportunity seriously and do it. Join the Seller Finance Coalition. If you've got the money to do it, get involved that way. If you've got the bandwidth to talk to other people, talk to other people. But get on board with this, because the last thing that you want to do is at the end of your real estate career think, boy, if we could have only changed it this way. No, you want to change it that way, and you want to see what that legacy is, not just in your portfolio, but your kids' portfolio, but also how you impact the community. How you change the lives of the kids down the street that are no longer playing on the asphalt parking lot, but are playing on grass that they have to mow.
All right.
One last thing. The other thing that you could do would be great is take your camera out and talk to your customers. Like one of the things that Glenn Lee came up with was really impactful was some videos of customers talking about the experience. It's not us telling people. We can show real people, 1-minute clip and send them into the email, and we'll put them up on the website as long as the people are okay with us sharing them. And if they just want them shared directly with the office, we'll do that too. But that's a big way to have an impact, and we all have video cameras in our pockets now. So just take it out and take a quick 1-minute video. That would be a big help as well.
Yep.
I found that people are very eager to do that, Like one lady said, I don't want to dial 1-800. I want to know who I'm dealing with when I buy a house,
That's right.
It's on YouTube. You can look at it. But there's nobody said no.
Excellent.
Let's thank our panel here. Thanks, Matt, for coming from D.C.